Hey everyone, this video is going to go over session 7 of my D&D campaign titled Tethra, Mocha, and Meanlocks. So when we last left off, our heroes have been escorted by these little boogeymen calling themselves Boggles, which is actually the race that they are, with ichor coming off their fingernails, big old heads with pointy ears with hairs on them, who like to scare and steal and are very mischievous. Lead them to their leader, who is Tethra, who is a Fomorian, and she's holding a massive club to her side, sitting on a big, what looks like kitchen chair. Asks the intruders in common who enters here. Then they respond back, but she doesn't seem to understand what they're saying. And then she starts talking in Sylvan, and only one of our heroes, Wink, the Eladrin elf, understands what she's saying, and he ends up being the translator in this exchange. And she introduces herself and asks why they have come here, and they kind of introduce themselves and say, we're looking for a way out of here. And she asks them to bow in front of her, and she's very happy when they do it very flamboyantly as they bow and show her reverence. And she says, "Why shouldn't I not kill you now?" Instead, she's like, "Oh, maybe, yes, you can kill the lizard that has infested our previous home." And the players are kind of apprehensive to make a deal with her, as she says, like, "Oh, if you're able to clear out the lizard from our old home, I can take you to someone that can get you out of here." And they don't take anything she says at face value. They're wanting proof. And there's a lot of discussion going on with the players, and I was trying to find at what point do I interject and say, hey, you guys can't just be having this conversation on what you should do as you're in front of this person who's awaiting an answer. Plus there's these Boggles that are running around your legs like little children, stealing things from you. And there took them quite a while, I would say about 20 minutes or so, to come up with a decision. I ended up just having the shadow goblin that serves Tethra come out, whose name is Mocha, and introduce himself and kind of be that olive branch between Tethra and the players, kind of be that middleman. And that seemed to work great. I had him speak in Goblin, which Tink, the human artificer, and Thadon, the bugbear rogue, both speak. I feel like languages aren't used very much in Dungeons and Dragons as much as they could be. It's everyone speaks common, so knowing these specialty languages isn't really that important. I want to make it feel okay, I know Dwarvish or I know Sylvan, so we're going to come across things that only speak these languages, so it gives those characters a place to shine. However, they no longer shine when they take 20 minutes to discuss everything, and then all the other players are basically speaking through that one player that speaks the language. So it's just kind of finding that fine line between when to let the one player just do all the talking versus allowing them to have some input first before demanding an answer from the player. So I feel like I struggled a little bit on there. I had the Boggles steal something from one of the players during that time. They stole some matches and they were lighting fires and "Ooh, well, fire!" Which they got a kick up. I had a ton of lines for the Boggles to use, but since it took so long to come to the decision, I really didn't use a lot of them. I'm hoping that I can recycle those and use them if they decide to fight this lizard, quote unquote. But they ended up saying yes, and Mocha, the shadow goblin, seemed like a good friend. He's had things to offer the players, just enough to get them moving. So the Boggles led the way as he was going to take them to their previous home, and they were going really fast, and one of the players slipped on their greasiness, and that's just oozing from their body at all times. So they left that cave, and then they started going into another cave entrance a little farther down on this mountain, on this crystal mountain, and the Boggles just pointed inside the cave and said, this is where we leave you, and just head on down this cave. So the players went ahead and did that, and they started walking down this cave, and they noticed that this cave's a lot more windy, like a river that splits and reconnects through different tunnels, and it started getting very eerie. And then the bugbear Thadon, who was scouting ahead, saw these chitin bug looking monsters who were the Meanlocks, and they lured one out and had a surprise round attack against them, and which battle ensued. I believe there was 4 of them. I had 3 normal ones. One of them went down in pretty much the first round, and then I had one that did more spellcasting things. And these Meanlocks are pretty tough. I honestly thought that this was going to be a really tough fight for the characters. There was 4 of them. 3 of them had 31 HP and 1 of them had 71 HP. And they rolled 3 natural 20s during the battle and made short work of them. The one that does spellcasting linked his mind with Olavax, the brass dragonborns, and when they attacked that one, any damage done did damage to Olavax, which I thought was a very great ability that it had. Kind of changed the dynamic of how they were fighting it, as well as, you know, they're in the Fey realm, so everything they meet is the personification of said traits, and Meanlocks are paranoia, so I had a lot of fun giving them things that they're thinking about or seeing or feeling as they were attacking these things. And they honestly started to have sympathy for some of these, like they wanted to know what was happening or if they were actually bad. So I thought it went well. Some players were struggling with the lighting again, since only half of them can see in the dark. So hopefully that's not an issue for too much longer, because it is hard for me as a DM to keep track of all the lighting on top of having to work with Roll20, remembering all the monster stats, as well as trying to correct the players. One thing that did come up during the fight was some of the rules that I was not aware of, like the frightened condition, which one of the players said to me. So I really appreciate them having those rules ready so I can say, hey, what does the frightened condition do? And then they can just read it off right then and there. We don't have to wait for anything. And then everyone is clear on what that rule does. That way, moving forward, you know, we have a good refresher. I think sometimes we assume that after you've encountered something once that you will remember it. And that's just not the way it works. You know, sometimes fear says that you turn around and use the dash action, versus this time the fear one was just you can't move any closer and you have disadvantage when you attack it. So I really appreciate when my players are prepared and they can really help me alleviate some of those pain points, especially with the rules. So after the battle, I didn't want to end it there, so they kept on scouting forward, and they eventually came into the old home of the Fomorian, Boggle, and Shadow Goblins, and I explained to Thadon, who was invisible, basically the whole fight. He didn't make any attacks against anything, and they still won. He saw like a pile of something in the distance, as well as like a big mass moving back and forth. It wasn't close enough or a big enough space for him to make out anything. But then he did hear a voice saying, we have a visitor. And that's where we ended the session. So I'm interested to see how the players are going to react to Lysara, who's the Topaz Dragon. Want to understand why she drove them out, because she drove them out for good reason. They were mining too far. They were questioning the integrity of the mountain, as well as getting into other creatures' domains that have a lot more impact and would have destroyed them without any hesitation. So I've made it so no matter which one the players choose, it's not something easy. Like Lysara had good reason for doing what she did, but again, she did end up killing Shadow Goblins. So, I mean, the Fomorian, the Shadow Goblin, and the Boggles all have good reason to want to kill this lizard. But at the same time, if they just would have listened, then they would have not encountered this issue. I'm also going to have Lysara tell the players that if they can kill the Fomorian or get the Fomorian and the rest of them to come work for her, then she will also show them to someone who can get them out of here. So both roads lead to the same ending. It's just what fight do they want to pick? If any, they don't have to fight any of them. They can also just go out and search for someone else to help them. So I'm interested to see what they'll choose and how they'll handle this situation. So stay tuned for the next video and we'll see how the players reacted. So enjoy.